The United States finds itself in interesting times. Depending on your outlook, you might see it as dark times. You might see it as just about to blossom into something great again. But to go through the situation we find ourselves in, I have Dennis Prager with me today. Dennis, thank you so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So, just a little background on you. For those that don't know, you've been doing conservative radio hosting for decades. You've authored many books. You are the founder of the world renowned Prager University. You cover topics intelligently on culture, religion, politics. On a personal level, you have been a mentor to me unknowingly. And I appreciate everything that you have done over the many, many decades that you've been speaking. So thank you for taking time to come on. I do want to give a plug. I have read all of your Rational Bible series and found it to be incredibly insightful, helping me understand the context, the history, the backstory. So I just wanted to, on a personal level, thank you for writing those. You have a new one coming out, right? Numbers.
Well, there are five books to the beginning of the Bible, known as the Torah. They're the basis of the Old Testament and the New Testament. No Torah, no Judaism, no Christianity. Of course, the Ten Commandments are in two of those books. So there are five books. My commentaries on Genesis and Exodus and Deuteronomy are out, and Numbers is coming out this year, and finally Leviticus, hopefully by the end of next year. They are the most important thing in many ways, certainly that I've written, and maybe that I've even done, because the abandonment of the Bible as the basis of our values is the crisis that we're in. It's really as simple as that, but even many religious people don't quite get what the Bible says. And I call it the rational Bible because I don't ask people to take anything that I say on faith. I use reason to explain everything. And if there are 5,000 reviews on Amazon, so people can see the effect that it has on people who read the rational Bible.
Oh, that's great. Well, I'm going to ask you some questions today more about that. But the first one that I wanted to jump in is, we hear words like fascism, socialism, communism, Marxism. Which of these ideologies do you believe is taking over the United States most, and which of them is most dangerous?
Well, in certain sense, they're all taking over, because the difference between Marxism and fascism is minimal. It's more theoretical than practical. Both involve the suppression of liberty. Wherever the left has taken over, and let me make clear at the outset, I always distinguish between left and liberal. Liberalism and leftism have almost nothing in common. The only thing they share is belief in big government, but they otherwise share no values. In fact, you can summarize the American tragedy almost in a sentence: liberals don't vote their values. Liberals vote for the left-wing party. It's no longer a liberal party, because they have been led to believe that the distinction between conservative / right and fascism / Nazism is minimal. It's a brainwash. I had it. I understood it when I was thinking about these issues beginning in high school. And one of the first books I bought, I'll never forget, was Danger on the Right. It was sort of a classic in the 50s, 60s. I was obviously in the 60s, but it was written before me. And the whole theme is that as you go rightward, you end up with Hitler. And this is what most liberals believe. So even though they share no values with the left, they continue to vote for the left. So, as I always say, conservatives vote their values and the left votes its values, but liberals don't vote their values. The people who are protecting liberalism today are called conservatives.
Hmm. Now you say as people go further right, they end up at Hitler. Is this why the
That's what the left believes. That's what the left is taught. That forgive me for interrupting. That is what this started with Stalin. Stalin called his enemies fascists. He called Trotsky, who was along with Lenin, the founder of the Bolshevik Party, the communists. He was the head of the Red Army. But when he and Stalin and Trotsky fell out, he declared that Trotsky was a fascist. And that has been what the left has done to this day. If you differ with the left, you're a fascist. And that lie, that smear, is held by every major medium in the United States and every major university and high school and elementary school. And it has stuck. Stalin won.
wow, okay. So, but with that logic, from the left's perspective, the further right you go, you end up at Hitler. Is this why Democrats and the mainstream media in America try so hard to push Trump to this far right, Hitler-like figure?
Well, it's a perfect example. I mean, calling Trump an anti-Semite, which they did, by the way, when he was running for president. I was on CNN in the days when CNN would actually have me on, and it's probably, in fact, I'm going to try to look for it after our dialogue here, because I would like to put it up, where I was on with a panel of 4 liberals and liberal slash left. I don't remember which was liberal and which was left. And I was I think the only Jew on the show, and not just a Jew, a quite committed Jew who was taught Judaism, written an introduction to Judaism. That's, I think, the most widely read English language introduction to Judaism. I'm a rather active Jew. I'm not just born one. And I kept saying, you have no basis to say that Donald Trump is an anti-Semite. I mean, this is just a smear. But it doesn't matter. That's what they did. He's an anti-Semite, fascist, a dictator, all of these terms. Then he was president for 4 years, and we had none of the anti-Semitism, or very little of it, that we have today. They lied that he called Nazis fine people. It's a lie. We have a very important PragerU video given by Steve Cortez, who used to be with CNN, on how the Charlottesville lie is a lie. He never called Nazis fine people. And they continue with that lie. Joe Biden, whose commitment to truth is nil, constantly speaks about the Trump as having said that Nazis were fine people. So that's right. That what you pointed out, that's the rhetoric. He's a fascist. By the way, they can't have it both ways. If indeed he's a fascist and an anti-Semite, and pushing us toward a neo-Nazism in the country, why wouldn't they cheat in an election? If I were a German in 1932, the last free elections in Germany till the end of World War II, wouldn't I have cheated to stop Hitler from taking power? They can't have it both ways. Oh, we wouldn't cheat, but he is, after all, like a Nazi. So, really, you wouldn't cheat to keep a Nazi out of power? So,
Yeah,
but it doesn't matter. Who's going to call them on it? The New York Times?
probably not. Yeah, like he hates Jews so much that he's the most pro-Israel president we ever had. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. His daughter is Jewish. His grandchildren are Jewish. I mean,
Right.
but
Right.
it's such a great way to get people's blood boiling. Oh, he must be anti-Semitic. He must be racist. It's just like you say, a way of dividing people and name calling. And unfortunately, a lot of people fall for the trick.
Well, that leads to another issue. What we have seen in the United States in the last few years is very, very troubling. And I don't have a positive view of humanity to begin with. So if I'm troubled, it's a really bad sign. I did have a positive view of the vast majority of my fellow Americans, but I now realize that anything, did I say anything? I want to emphasize anything that is said often enough will be believed by a very large number of people. The proof is not even that Trump is an anti-Semite. The proof is men give birth. There's a very large swath of Americans who believe that. That's including, I would say, probably at least half the teachers in the elementary schools and high schools of this country. I mean, that is an absurdity. The earth is flat has more truth to it than men give birth, because after all, at any given moment that we're standing on something, it's usually flat land. So as it's less absurd to say the earth is flat than men give birth. And vast numbers is only, by the way, of the well-educated, which proof is proof that it is brainwash, because the people who only went to high school or even high school dropouts don't believe men give birth. But if you went to Harvard, you're very likely to believe it.
Wow. Well, I can tell you as a man that how I know that men don't give birth, because the population would be zero. Men would not have babies.
It's a thought. I hadn't given that thought.
No man is pushing a baby out of his genitals. I can tell you that right now. So um, I wanted to talk about, you did an interview with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and in there you guys discussed this idea of corporate capture, from the military to big pharma, to the agro food business. What exactly in your mind is corporate capture? And in your estimation, has America fallen to this idea of corporate capture?
Yeah, that ironically is sort of the definition of fascism, is government corporate collusion in wielding power over the society. United Airlines announced a few years ago that it was reserving half of its places in its pilot school for women and people of color. That's what we call woke. It also renders this flyer, and I'm on the second highest level of United. I fly about 100 times a year. I try to avoid United now, and I have no fear of flying. I couldn't care less till that announcement. I couldn't care less if my pilot were black or my pilot were a woman. I've had both. I slept just as well on the flight as if the pilots were white males. I don't know what they are, and I don't care. Now I care, because they have announced merit will no longer be the only criterion by which we at United Airlines will choose a pilot. That's very scary. It should literally scare people. It means something other than merit will be used to choose pilots. That's government or left-wing collusion with corporate America. As regards pharma, we have been bathing in their lies. It turns out that the vaccine wasn't even a vaccine. It was an injection, but it wasn't really a vaccine. They hadn't really tested it. They buy about half the ads on television news, and the purpose of it is not to get you to buy their product, but to influence all the media to not criticize big pharma. And by the way, again, much of my life I had defended the pharmaceutical companies against the left-wing attack on big pharma. I said, whatever you'll say, think of all the lives that pharmaceutical drugs have saved. And now I realize that there's a tremendous amount of corruption and collusion with state authorities. The the leftism of the corporations, from the Los Angeles Dodgers, which has a night to honor a gay group that mocks Catholic nuns. I mean, mocks them, and they're honored. They're not only allowed to appear there, or the NFL having the black national anthem played along with the national anthem. You can't have two national anthems in a nation. That means there are two nations, which the left believes. They would ideally have more than two nations. These are very scary developments, and the collusion of big business and big media, big tech. It's got the word big. The odds are it's corrupt.
Yeah, no, that's a great way. It's like almost like they self-identify by allowing the word big in front of their name. You had said on Twitter that Putin didn't invade Ukraine while Donald Trump was president because Putin likely feared Trump and the repercussions. You then said the world is in chaos because no one fears Biden except maybe half the United States. Could you elaborate on what you mean? I get it, and I totally, it resonates with me, but I want my audience to hear your thoughts on that.
About 2 years ago, one of the greatest living historians, Neil Ferguson, formerly of Harvard, now at the Hoover Institution at Stanford, was on my show. And I had no idea when I asked him this question what he would say, but I knew that I would take it seriously, whatever he answered, because he is an extraordinarily fair-minded, truth-seeking, and brilliant historian. So I said to him, Professor Ferguson, do you believe that Putin would have invaded if Donald Trump were president? And there wasn't even a moment of thought. All he said was no. And that was my suspicion. But had he said, well, I'll tell you, Dennis, it's very tough to know, and et cetera, I would have rethought, because I so respect him, I would have rethought my position. But all he did was confirm it. And yes, you quoted me correctly. If the American president is not feared by the bad guys of the world, the bad guys of the world will make the world much worse. I have said all of my life, American strength prevents staggering amounts of cruelty on earth. I'm not sure that October 7th would have occurred in Israel if Donald Trump were president. But nobody fears the Democratic Party. It doesn't matter, by the way, whether it's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff. It's irrelevant. Today's Democrats are all leftists, whether they acknowledge it or not. There are almost no liberals left in the leadership of the Democratic Party. And that means acceptance of a lot of evil on earth. It means that more than anything, America will not intimidate anybody, including enemies. Whereas when Donald Trump was president, people were scared of him. And that's good. I don't want the American president loved. I want the American president feared. The only, which goes to an interesting, allow me a sidebar here.
Yeah, please.
Because I get my values from the Bible, which is why I'm writing this commentary, The Rational Bible. There are only two beings that we're told to fear, and they are God and parents. A lot of translations, I happen to know biblical Hebrew very, very well, almost like English. And they translate the word fear as revere, because the translators are wimps. They don't like the idea that there is a law in Exodus that ish imo v'aviv tiro, a man shall fear his mother and father. Notice, by the way, mother is first there. Uh, if you have no fear of your parents, you probably won't grow up to be decent. If you think you can do whatever you want and don't fear repercussions, I have an interesting anecdotal proof. Many years ago, I asked on my radio show, if you didn't take drugs in high school, why didn't you? Almost everyone who called in said this: because my mother would kill me. It's a very important thing. They feared their mother. They always mention their mother, interestingly, but they feared their mother, and that was good. When there's no more fear of teachers, there's no more fear of police. The only fear in America today is of the left, of the state when it's run by the left. That's the only fear remaining. Not fear of God, not fear of parents, not fear of teachers, not fear of police, but there is fear of the left and the state. And that, in some ways, summarizes where we're at. So to get back to your question, yeah, I want the American president feared. And the bad guys of the world don't fear Joe Biden or any Democrat.
No, I completely agree with you. I don't think the attack on Israel would have happened. I don't think the attack on Ukraine would have happened. I don't know that we would be dealing with the Houthis in Iran. Donald Trump, for all of his good and all of his flaws, was a wild card, and people did not know what to expect, but they knew that he was tough. And I don't see that with Biden. He's not.
Oh, he's tough on Republicans,
Yeah.
on people who entered the Capitol on January 6th. He's not tough on Iran, but he is tough on Americans.
Yeah. Yeah. So, speaking of the Biden administration, the biggest topic I would say in the last 10 days, or at least according to how my videos are performing, is this battle between Governor Greg Abbott in Texas and President Biden. And a lot of people's eyes are being opened to just how many illegal immigrants are coming into the country. How dangerous, in your estimation, is it to have 8, 10, 12 million people with all kinds of different values than American values flooding into the country, milking our welfare systems, our legal systems, getting better benefits than our veterans, our senior citizens? In your estimation, how dangerous is it for the Biden administration to allow this?
What would be interesting is to ask them. I mean, it's the answer is self-evident to you and me. I think to anybody who thinks fairly and rationally. If this is not the smoking gun that the left wishes to destroy America as it has been for 200 something years, then there is no smoking gun. I mean, this is the obvious. Open border means you don't have a country, which is fine with them. And what you may have is a lot more Democratic voters, which I think is part of I think that's part of it. I think the bigger part really is to end America as it has been. And they're succeeding. What can I tell you?
Yeah, yeah, it is sad to watch things. It feels like a different country than it was 4 years ago. I think most people are
Well,
feeling that.
it is. It's so interesting you should mention that. I'm very involved in classical music. I conduct orchestras periodically. And I was watching a video of the New York Philharmonic Orchestra on the 10th anniversary of 9/11. So that would have been, so that was 01. This would have been 2011 at the Philharmonic Hall in New York. They had a night to remember 9/11, 10th anniversary. So this again is 2011, which is 13 years ago. And they opened up with the national anthem, played by the New York Philharmonic, conducted by then Alan Gilbert. To watch this, the moment it was announced, no one was told to stand, and every single member of the audience that I could see, which was most of them, stood up. Most had their hands on their heart. And this is New York City. It was never a conservative city, not in my lifetime. Everyone stood, but most had their hands on their heart. They sang with passion. That's just 2011. It's not long ago. New York City, a sense of we're all Americans. We love the national anthem. And now the Super Bowl is playing two national anthems, one for blacks and one for the rest of us. It's yes, it is a different country. That is correct. I
Yeah.
looked at it and I thought, wow, to be nostalgic for something that only happened 13 years ago. Usually you're nostalgic for things that happened when you were a kid. But of course, from when I was a kid, I mean, America is unidentifiable.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how they've tried to use this national anthem. Like, I didn't realize the national anthem was seen as like a white suppressing song, because from my understanding of reading the history of that song and singing it my whole life, it is about the birth of a nation that would provide liberty and freedom, and yet they continue to take our liberties away in pursuit of climate change, or take our liberties away in pursuit of medical intervention, or whatever Dr. Fauci thinks is correct that week. Like, why do humans give up their liberty so easily?
I actually have an answer for that. That too is in the Bible, in the first 5 books. So the Israelites are taken out of Egypt by God and Moses. And the first thing they do is complain that they preferred the food in Egypt. They actually said that the food was better there. We want to go back. People do not yearn to be free. It's a myth. Freedom is a value, not an instinct. The human instinct is to be taken care of, not to be free. That's why leftism appeals to human instincts much more than American values do. It's a very big problem because we're battling the frail human nature when we're battling the left. People want to be taken care of. That's it. Give them food and health care, and they'll give you their liberty.
Yeah.
And this was, and by the way, unfortunately, it's true for many conservatives too. Look at all the churches that closed for because the government said so. Really, I mean, some churches didn't, some synagogues didn't, but by and large, they went along in lockstep. That you know, you there were all sorts of places allowed to function, and no church said you have to come. It was completely voluntary on the part of the parishioners, the congregants. If you don't want to come, you're afraid, by all means, stay home. But that we can't even gather, and the whole thing turned out to be a fraud. And by the way, I said it. This is not Monday morning quarterbacking. People watching this can look on the internet. In April of 2020, within 2 months of the lockdowns, I said the lockdowns were the greatest mistake in international history. And of course, I was widely condemned as with every possible adjective. But I was right. And the schools shut down. They didn't shut down in Sweden. No kids died, no teachers died in Sweden from this. But it didn't matter. Thank God for Sweden, because we had a living example of not doing what America did. America had disproportionately, I think, the highest number of deaths in the world.
We did.
Yeah. So it'd be, my only question is, if they did it again, how many Americans would be sheep? And I don't know the answer. I think fewer. I think that we now know that the words experts say are useless. They're useless in the sense, or one sense is, what has happened is experts say is to secular people what thus saith the Lord is to religious people. God has been supplanted by experts. So the experts tell you to vaccinate your children with the COVID vaccine, though virtually no child died of COVID, and a terrible amount of damage was done by the vaccine to children. Experts say close the schools, that people still respect the teachers' unions, the greatest proponents of lockdowns in school. The damage done to millions of young Americans may be permanent, intellectually, emotionally. All this is done by the left because people are sheep, and they pay no price. People will, their kid is depressed, even perhaps suicidal, thanks to those lockdowns, and they'll vote Democrat. How's that?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, when Fauci finally admitted within the last 30 days, the social distancing of 6 feet that we said would save everybody was made up.
That's right.
I thought it would feel better to hear him tell the truth finally, and it didn't. I'm just still mad at him. He, like he ruined so many people's lives. He interrupted families.
No, I am less mad at him. I have contempt for him, but I'm less mad at him than I am at any American who still respects him.
Mm, that's a great point. That's a great point. I don't think most people know the truth that's coming out about.
Most people don't give a damn about the truth. Most people want to be taken care of. And if you have to lie, if the government has to lie to give you more benefits, they're happy. The human being is not an impressive creature. There are some impressive humans, but human nature is not particularly admirable, which is what I learned in third grade in my yeshiva, my religious Jewish school. Because it's in the Bible, in the Torah, Genesis 8, and God said, the will of man's heart is towards evil from his youth. The Enlightenment unleashed the stupidest idea I have ever encountered, that people are basically good. And that people believe it after Auschwitz, and after Mao, and after Stalin, and after October 7th, shows you that people believe what they want to believe. They don't pursue truth. The motto of Harvard is Veritas, which is Latin for truth. Why did they make it why did they make it their value? Because it is a value. Like liberty, truth is a value, not an instinct. People don't pursue truth. If they pursued truth, there would be no NIH or CDC. They're liars. That's it. There would be no Democratic Party. But they don't pursue truth. That's it. They pursue pleasure.
This desire for power within politicians has been really fascinating to me as I've covered this for the last 3 years. I don't, you're probably not in the circles of marketing experts, but there's one that I really like. His name was Dan Kennedy, and in his book, one of his books, he said, most people want a king. They don't want freedom, just like you say. And I never really understood that until this conversation where he said secretly people want a king. And I think that's why we were under monarchies for so long. And that's what made America so different, is we didn't want a king, but now we do again. It seems we want an authority, whether good or bad, to at least say the king will take care of us. So you've helped me understand one of my marketing people's saying, secretly we want a king. I know we have limited time here, Dennis. I wanted to ask one last question, and this is kind of personal because you said something that really changed me. I went through a very difficult time with business and family and death in the family, and I could feel bitterness sinking into my heart. And I was watching one of your YouTube lectures, I think on the book of Leviticus. It was at a university. I was watching it, and you said that one of the hardest things is to love God, and that's why he made it a commandment. And I shared that with other people, and they're like, no, it's easy to love God. I'm like, you haven't had hard times. When people go through hard times, that's when you realize that it is hard to love God, and that's why he made it a commandment. It's part of the Shema prayer, to love God with all your heart, your soul, and your might. Could you maybe just elaborate a little bit more on that? Because those words literally changed the trajectory of me going down a bitter path.
Well, you made my day, because I say these things and I always wondered, did anybody hear it?
I heard it.
You heard it. Yes, actually, I have a book of essays called Think a Second Time. It's 44 essays on 44 subjects, and one of them is the most difficult law in the Torah. The Torah has 613 laws. There are no laws in the prophets or in the writings, the rest of the Old Testament. All the laws are in the first 5 books, the Torah. And the big one, which is, of course, repeated by Jesus, is one of the 2 great laws: love God and love your neighbor. But I am open in my life, in my broadcasts, and in my rational Bible commentary. I'm open. And I do believe it's the hardest law to observe, at least it is for me. And by the way, not because I had hard times, because of the hard times others have had. I have been obsessed with good and evil since I was in high school. And by the way, obsessed with both. I'm obsessed with evil, but I'm also obsessed with good, because good is so rare. So I want to know why some people turn out good. That's a real interesting puzzle. I'm not shocked that there were communists and Nazis, but I am shocked that there were people who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust. And on a less dramatic example, I'm shocked that there are people, there are pastors and rabbis who kept their houses of prayer open. They're the ones who have to be explained, not the rabbis, priests, and pastors who went along with the government. They don't have to be explained. The people who have to be explained are the handful of rabbis, priests, and ministers or pastors who kept their churches and synagogues open. They're the puzzle. So uh, I actually regard it as God being lovable, that he commands us to love him, because it's an admission that he's not lovable. God is admitting, I know it's hard, so I'm telling you, you have to do it. If it came naturally, there would be no law. There'd be no law to love God. It doesn't come naturally. When I meet people who tell me they love God, my father loved God, as an example, and my father saw terrible things. He was in the Navy in the Pacific for 2.5 years. It's not like he didn't see suffering. He was the generation that witnessed the Holocaust. He was well aware of suffering, but he loved God. Some people do naturally. I'm not one of them. I've worked to believe in God. I've worked to love God. I think, generally speaking, you have to work for everything that's noble. So I don't have an issue with that.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm glad you heard that. And if some people love God, I sort of envy them that it came that naturally to them. I love my wife. That doesn't come with much effort. By the way, for some people, that is an effort. I will admit it. And I've been divorced, so it's not like I don't know. I love my kids. That didn't come well. Yeah, that didn't come with much effort. Liking your kids, that can come with effort.
Yeah.
Although right now, I must admit I'm very blessed. I like my kids and I love them. But that's why, by the way, one of my favorite words in the English language is like. I think it's often more important to like someone than love someone.
Yeah. Interesting. Interesting. Well, I'm with you. You know, when people say that, oh, I have a simple testimony, or I just love God, I go, oh, bless your heart. I wish I could get there. But you know what? One of my most sincere prayers was telling God just how mad at him I was. And
That's right. That's good. That's
yeah,
good. Then you're real and your God is real. Anyone who has never gotten angry with God does not have a real relationship with God. It is not possible to see the suffering of humanity and never get angry with God. There's something wrong with you.
yeah, yeah. I've had people. I've shared that story. You know, just cussing him out, being mad, just being so mad. They said, "I can't believe you dared to do that." And I said, "Well, the God I believe in is big enough to take it."
Well, this will might help these people because God himself, when he names Jacob Israel in the book of Genesis, he explains what Israel means. Struggle with God. The name of the Jewish people, of the chosen people, is struggle with God.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Well, I appreciate you coming on. I'm looking forward to the Rational Bible Numbers edition to come out, and I will be one of the
Good.
first people to buy it.
Thank
I
you.
just, I,
Thank
I
you.
just want to personally thank you for having courage for so many decades to encourage people to seek the good, to do the good, to be the good. Um, Being a human is not easy, and being a good human is even harder.
Being a good human. That's the trick. That's the trick.
Yeah.
You're a good man. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you
Thank you.